So I figured I'd do a little update for everybody. The engine is in the car after a year. So as far as an update goes on this thing, for bottom end I went with a version 7, which is the factory forged internals. And for the heads I went with the version 8, which has a little bit larger valves than the version 7. This is a 207, as I said in the last video. I didn't have the engine or anything in the last video. It's been over a year since I've updated you guys. But the car is now 6-speed swapped. The 6 speeds in it. I got a nice Kein mount there. I have the engine mounts, the trans mounts, all the mounts. I've actually had a lot of help with this build. Darkside Preformance provided me with a Mishimoto radiator, an intake, and as well as a Wolbro 255 fuel pump for this thing. So I'm going to be working with them in the upcoming season as long as it comes. Coronavirus has really slowed down the progress on this thing, money-wise. So I'm hoping to have it all together in the next month or so. It does have the 6-speed Brembos, and both subframes are STI as well as the larger control arms in the front and the rear, which, hold on, you can't really see, but whatever, you get the point. It's basically a full STI drivetrain swap. As far as the interior goes, it's still in complete shambles. The entire dash is wired pretty much. I gotta have a couple things looked over, but it's almost ready to go. Everything's bolted in, steering column's bolted in, HVAC is in, and all that. I just gotta throw the fuel pump back in and start reassembling the interior. And then from there, run some new fuel lines, because these are all crusty and hard and probably going to crack and set the car on fire and burn it to the ground. So gonna run some new fuel lines, and I'm thinking about deleting my ABS pump. On my last blue car that you saw in the last video, I just pulled the fuse and ran it with no ABS. But I feel like I could get better performance out of not having that ABS pump. Some other stuff that's gone into it, I got these JDM crystal lights that everybody does, and I went with clear corners, clear fender lights, and then clear bumper lights. I will be running a really big front mount on this thing, so hopefully the turbo can actually spool with that. As far as turbos go, I'm running a VF37 twin scroll IHI from a newer STI. I'm not exactly sure what gen it's from, but yeah, other than that, it's pretty much coming together. Really nothing too special yet, but hope to have more progress updates soon. I'd also like everybody to pardon me for the massive mess. I had to move all my tools out of work. I got laid off, unfortunately, but I guess that gives me more time to work on this thing. Can't be too sad about it. Another note, I wired this car for a 2-pin alternator in the last year that I was putting this thing together, so I'm going to have to remove all of the engine bay wiring out of this thing. Not the firewall, but just the stuff that goes through the fender, and rewire that into the interior, but that shouldn't be too big of a deal. I'd also like to give a shout out to Kein. He was a huge help in this project. He really went out of his way to set me up with what I needed. As I said, I have the engine mounts, I have the pitch stop mount, I have the transmission mounts, I have the diff carrier and the diff brace mounts, as well as a set of locking bolts for the rear subframe, all provided by him. He really made it all come together as far as mounting goes, and I really appreciate that. He really has some high quality stuff too. Everything here fit perfectly. I didn't have an issue with anything, other than when I was installing the engine last night. I made the mistake of putting the motor mounts in backwards, so it was kind of a pain in the ass. We had to pull the motor back out and switch those over, but that's nothing but a fault of my own. Good friend of mine, Andrew, helped me go through this whole thing, and all we did was a polish to start it off. We're going to be doing wax and everything once the car's out of the garage, but we wanted to see the actual paint and see if it was worth keeping, and as far as I can tell, this paint's still in pretty good shape. This fender here, it looks like the front of this car may have been stuffed into a tire wall or something at some point. It was a race car in its previous life. That's a little bent there. That in the strut tower, not in the strut tower, but the little piece in front of it is a little bit crimped too. So I think this fender was replaced. It looks like it was just some single stage paint. Didn't really come out too great, but I can't really complain. It looks good from 5 feet anyway. As far as suspension goes, this has both of the STI subframes, as I said. It's got the wider lower control arms. Right now it just has stock STI suspension in it. I'm waiting until I get my job back to order my Öhlins that I'm going to be getting for it. So I'm a little bit wider track width, which we'll have to see how that works out with these narrow fenders. This fender's already pretty smoked, so I'm not really too worried about it if I do mess up some fenders. But the rear is mainly what I'm worried about. So I mean, if I put the camera down here, you can see that it's pretty much flush with the body line at the studs. So we'll have to see how it goes. And everything on this, as far as like the rotors go and suspension wise, it's all just getting put together for mock-up. I'll be running new rotors. I'm going to have the Brembos rebuilt. I'm going to have them powder coated. I've been working with a powder coater out of Suffield, or I'm sorry, out of East Granby, called Perry P2 Coatings. He's a really great guy, and we're going to work to get this whole thing powder coated. Other than that, I mean, this is pretty much what this thing is at this point. It's going to be a track rat. I initially wanted it as a really fun daily driver, but I actually went out and bought a trailer for it that I was going to show you, but it's not over there anymore. But anyway, it's looking pretty good.